So I recently began running a new campaign called Before the Lost City, and I wanted to give review sessions for the games that we've played in hopes that any other dungeon masters who wanted to run these old school Dungeons and Dragons modules would be able to learn from some of the mistakes that I make and some of the successes that my players have. So in this session, we're entering session 2 for The Lost City, and I had 5 characters show up to the open table game. This particular session, there was Ferric, the dwarf, Ronaresh, the half-orc, Kornacht, who is a elf rogue, Peros, who is a human rogue, or halfling rogue, excuse me, and Candor. Now, Candor is new, and I can't actually remember. I didn't write down what Candor is, but Candor was not there in either of the previous sessions. So these, the previously in the pyramid that they're exploring, which is the Lost City module, the characters had discovered most of what's in the first 2 tiers of the pyramid. Now they're ready to explore tier 3, where the Revolving Passage is. So immediately the characters head down to tier 3. Now on their way to the Revolving Passage, because it took them a long time to kind of figure out what was going on, I rolled a random encounter in tier 3. One of the things that I really want to do is make sure that the pyramid seems alive, that there's an ecosystem there, and it's not just a static place ready to be cleared, rather that people and things are moving from place to place. And so as they turned the corner heading towards the Revolving Passage, they found somebody who was a part of the Magi of Usamigaris. So they say, "Oh, hello, who are you?" And they do their greetings, and the Magi ends up realizing that, hey, if these are outsiders from the desert, our faction would benefit greatly by getting some of them to join us. So the Magi brings them back over to the headquarters of the Magi of Usamigaris, and they get the same introduction that the Brotherhood gave earlier in session 1. Basically, this is who we are, this is where you are, this is why this is a pyramid and not a bustling city anymore, and what we're trying to do is restore glory and save Synodicians from the evil of Zargon. And so they get that little spiel from the Magi of Usamigaris, and then the leader asks if anybody wants to join the Magi. Everybody sits there for a while and looks at each other, and then finally Candor steps up and says, "I would like to join." So they go through their initiation ceremony, and Candor is initiated into the Magi of Usamigaris. Now, what this gives him is it gives him a safe space. It gives him the opportunity to advance within the group, and probably most importantly, it gives him a trading post. So if he finds gold in the future, if he finds things he needs to sell, he can bring it back to the Magi and sell them or purchase items from them with the gold that he finds. The characters ask a few more questions of the Magi, and then they leave happy. Now, the way that this revolving door works, the Revolving Passage in the Lost City, is it's a hallway with buttons, kind of like elevator buttons. And if you push a button, like, for example, the button that refers to west, the door that you're at will the hallway will slowly rotate until the door you're at faces west. However, since it's a hallway, there's also a door on the other side, and the door on the other side would then be facing east. So the characters say, well, we just went through the west door to meet the Magi of Usamigaris. Let's find out what's through the east door. Turns out the warrior maidens of Madura are through the east door. So the characters walk in, say hi, and they see a bunch of warrior maidens hanging out around a table, and the warrior maidens stand up and say, "Who are you?" The characters begin to give their answer, and then I ask, "Wait a minute, Candor, are you still wearing the robes that you got from the Magi of Usamigaris?" And Candor sees the problem and doubles down and says, yes, I am. In fact, I step in the middle of the group and I put on my mask of the Magi of Usamigaris. Now, this in itself is not an aggressive act, or I should say it's not a violent act, but it is a daring one, and it is somewhat aggressive. And so the warrior maidens of Madura do not react they don't react well to it, and so they draw their weapons and give chase. So the characters, recognizing that, hey, there's 10 of them, and there's 5 of us, and they all look angry, we're going to run. So they run back to the Revolving Passage. They use some clever tactics to use the passage to try and not only escape the warrior maidens, but also lead the warrior maidens into the Magi of Usamigaris, and they're able to escape. The passageway they escape to is the North Passageway. So they begin to head north. Now, at the end of the North Passageway, there's a T intersection. One of the hallways leads to the right, the other one leads to the left. They decide they're going to go to the right because previously they had used the always right rule, which means you always move to the right when you're in a dungeon and you're not sure where you're going. And so they continued that rule. Well, that led them to a room, and in that room they saw a ramp leading down to the 4th level of the pyramid, tier number 4. So they're very excited about this, and they're about to head down the ramp to the 4th level of the pyramid, knowing that it was going to gain them experience, when they heard some people coming up it. So here I rolled another random encounter because they sat in this room for a while and talked about whether or not they should actually go down to the 4th pyramid or explore some more of this 3rd tier of the pyramid. So a few of them hid, a few of them just kind of stood there, and up walks a priest of Zargon and 12 followers. However, since there's a ramp, and since they've never met a priest of Zargon before, they don't know it's a priest of Zargon, and they can only see 6 of the followers. So the priest of Zargon sees these people hanging out, and he's on a mission to find victims to feed to Zargon, and he realizes, hey, I see 3 people here. Remember, 2 of the characters are hidden. He says, hey, I see 3 people here. If we can grab one of them, we have our victim for Zargon. And so the priest tries to convince everybody to come down and help them fight evil, and uses just some really generic speech, similar to what the Magi of Usamagara said, but with less specifics. The characters don't take the bait, and they say, actually, we're not going to follow you, but if you can let us through, we're just going to cross paths here and go our separate ways. So the priest waits until the very first character, Kander, is in between the followers before he tells his followers to attack Kander and grab him. It's at this point that Kander realizes they're not just 6 followers, there's 12 of them, and he might be in trouble. So Kander gets grappled, and the other characters spring out and begin fighting. The priest directs his followers to fight the characters who spring up, and directs the 2 followers who have grappled Kander to bring him down into the lower levels and eventually, hopefully, get him down far enough in the pyramid where they can feed him to Zargon. It seems to work for a moment until the priest is killed. The priest is killed by the half-orc barbarian, I believe, if I'm thinking from memory, and essentially the followers aren't sure what to do next. A few more of them die as they all begin to run to the lower levels of the pyramid, and eventually enough of them die that they fail their morale check, and they let Kander go, and they all just flee into the bottom of the pyramid. What the characters learned is that priests of Zargon are bad. They also learned that some people might try and get taken prisoner. However, the followers also learned something. They realized that, hey, these adventurers are pretty strong, and we can't just grab them like regular Synodician citizens. Next time, it's going to be interesting to see what the tactics of a priest of Zargon are, because they're definitely not going to try and take one of the characters captive if they're conscious. They're definitely going to dogpile them until they're unconscious, and then flee, and we'll see how it goes. At this point, the characters are on the 4th tier of the pyramid. They get the experience for making it to the 4th tier of the pyramid, and they're in a room. And this is an interesting room because there is a coffin in the middle, and the characters take a while to figure out what to gather up the courage to open it up. When they do, they're surprised by some sort of jack-in-the-box spring. They also cast Detect Magic and realize that the jars around the corners of the room are magical and are somehow tied to the bottom of this coffin, which is also magical. Eventually, someone gets the idea to put something in the jar and realizes that, hey, it disappears. And so they play around with it for a little bit. They put a few different objects into the jar, and it disappears, and they're not sure where it's going. Now, one of them does search the coffin, but rolls really poorly, and so they don't find the false bottom in the coffin that's hidden that would reveal all of these objects that they are now putting into the jars and essentially getting teleported into the coffin. So, in one last test, their goal is to see if they can put a lit candle into a jar, and when they do, it disappears, and they're not sure where it's gone. They stand around for a few more minutes discussing what they should do about these jars when they start to smell smoke. Someone makes a really good roll and realizes the smoke is coming. It's just a slight haze, but it's coming from the coffin. After a few minutes, it's visible smoke coming from the coffin. The players get scared and decide, you know what, we don't want to be here when something undead rises from this coffin and is on fire, so they take off. So the coffin is going to be burned when they return. But hey, it was a very fun interaction, and they did a really relatively interesting job of trying to figure out how it all worked. At this point, we were pretty much out of time for the evening, and so the session ended there, and they all returned back to the safe room up on tier 2 of the pyramid. In session 3, which I just held last night, there was only 4 characters in this session. So this was Kornacht, the half-elf. The elf rogue. There's Rogar, the paladin dragonborn. There's Ronaresh, the half-orc barbarian, and there's Peros, the halfling rogue. And they discussed for a while what to do at the beginning, and they decided that last time in session 2, they did not have a good introduction with the warrior maidens of Madura. And they reasoned that Kander was the character who did not make a great first impression and really made the maidens angry. And they decided that, hey, you know what? We are going to go back and see if we can just talk to them. And it works. They go back to the warrior maidens. They kind of explain themselves, say that we're just acquaintances with that Candor character. We're not really friends. And they're able to get the spiel from the warrior maidens of Madura. They find out who they are, what they're trying to do. They're trying to save Sinadisha, fight against Zargon. And they find the warrior maidens of Madura and their viewpoints on the other factions within the pyramid. At this point, the warrior maidens ask if anybody wants to become a member. And Peros, the rogue halfling, says, yes, I would like to be. Now, the way the module is written is each faction has a specific set of gender or class or species that they would accept as full members, and anybody else can become like a partial member, basically. And I think the reason that the designer did this is they wanted to encourage the characters to have different affiliations with the different factions and have a good, at least a good relationship with a few of the factions, because that would make a lot of the follow-up to this adventure really a lot more interesting, especially if they make it all the way down to the underground city. What I realized was my characters were already doing that. They were already joining different factions without even needing to force these regulations on who can join what factions. So I just at that point threw it out. And I said, okay, Peros, the rogue halfling, can join the warrior maidens of Madura as a full member. There are no restrictions with who can join what faction. And that's how I'm going to be playing the Lost City from now on, since my characters seem to be joining whatever faction they want to, and not everybody is joining like a single faction, for example. So Peros joins the warrior maidens of Madura and gets full membership, gets the trading post, which includes different items from the other two trading posts, and gets the title of maiden, which he is very excited about, and he'll be more excited about at the end of this session, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. After a successful meeting with the warrior maidens, the group decides to head north. And last session, they head north and went to the right, but there was a T intersection, and they could have gone left. So this time they head left. Now, the left passage is dangerous. It is a trap with a really dangerous environmental hazard and some more dangerous creatures past the trap. And so they get to the first room on the left, and they open it up, and there's a bunch of storage shelves up there. There's a few crates, but everything's covered in yellow mold. So one of the characters has the really bright idea to burn the yellow mold, and it works spectacularly. In fact, it's written in the book that the mold is only weakness is fire. And so immediately the mold starts burning, the shelves start burning. Once many of the shelves were burnt, the last shelf standing was along the back wall. So one of the characters says, well, I'm going to go to the back wall and inspect it. When they cross the room, this triggers the trap. And what the trap is it's a water trap. The door swings shut, water starts pouring from the ceiling, and there are floor drains. However, they're not open until the room is completely full of water, in which they open and they begin to drain. Obviously, the fear here is drowning, but also the environmental hazard exists. So this character triggers the trap, finds the floor drains, and finds the secret hidden door, which they can escape to, and I don't think actually that character told anyone about it. A different character then goes and finds the same secret door, yells to everybody, hey, there's a secret door. And then another character decides that they're going to smash apart the shelves blocking the secret door, and that way they can all escape this raising water. They smash apart the shelves, the mold spores go flying everywhere. Two of the characters make their save and they're fine, and two of the characters fail their save. One of them fails the additional save, which means now they have long-term effects of this mold spore and will die eventually if not taken care of. The mold spores also might knock one of those characters unconscious. So at this point, the room is filling with water. They have two doors available to them, but one of them has swung shut. One character is unconscious, and one of them is conscious, but has long-term effects of this and is soon to die. One of the characters opens the concealed door. The water starts rushing out of the room, but it rushes into the adjacent room, which overturns a basket of pit vipers, which the characters don't know about. And so now all of a sudden, the water problem is solved, but there are now poisonous pit vipers swimming in the water. The character who is conscious but got hit by the mold spores decides to go inspect the other room, immediately is bit by a pit viper and falls unconscious. At this point, I was nervous that there was going to be a total party kill on the third session, and I was just curious to see how the characters were going to get out of it, especially because the paladin, who was the only character with healing powers, was the one that was one of the ones that was unconscious. And so I was kind of thinking to myself, I don't want to massage the rules here. I don't want to massage the way the book is written. I told them that I was going to run it as written. I'm on their side, but I'm going to run it as written because it should be lethal and danger should be kind of on the forefront of what they're doing. They got lucky and they got out of it. They were able to kill the pit vipers within the next round. And the last character action before the Dragonborn Paladin made potentially the last failed death save was able to use medicine and stabilize the paladin, and so the paladin was able to at least be stabilized while unconscious. They worked together and ended up resting for about an hour to at least get the paladin and the rogue who had fallen unconscious up to 1 health, and then they used some hit dice and another short rest to get back into fighting shape. From there, they find another secret door, which leads them to the hallway that is northwest from the Revolving Passage. Now, at this point, they're discussing a long rest because they're mostly out of healing. The paladin had used his cure disease ability on the rogue who was dying of mold spore inhalation. And so everyone was healed, but most of their healing things were gone. The only healing potion in the group had been drank, and so they were in rough shape. They requested to go back to the safe room and rest there because it's a safe room. But one of the rules I had made, and I still stand to it, is that the safe room is an artifact of the open table game. It is not a resource to be used during any given session. So the safe room is there so that if your character goes to the safe room after session 3, but you cannot make it to session 4, you know your character is going to be safe for session 5 when you can make it back. It is not to be used as a safe room in tactical emergencies. And so I said, no, you cannot go back to the safe room to use that as a long rest. What you can do is pick a room in the pyramid anywhere you want and take a long rest there. They decide to camp out in that hallway and take a long rest. So I divided the long rest into 4 watches. I made 4 random encounter rolls, and the very first watch was a random encounter. Now, I kind of looked at the map at this point, and normally I would normally I would roll a random encounter, but I realized that the room they were closest to, that room that's northwest from the Revolving Passage, inside is a lizard called Draco. Now, I couldn't find a 5th edition Draco lizard in the monster manual. Let me know in the comments if it's actually there. So what I did instead was I used a basilisk, but instead of a gaze weapon, I said if the basilisk bites anybody, they get petrified, poison petrified. Basically, their body would be paralyzed and they would be unable to move. They'd kind of have this rigid nature to them. And so during the first watch of this long rest, the lizard slowly comes out the door. Its tongue is flicking through the air, tasting things, and it realizes that food is nearby. It starts walking towards the group. So the character on watch wakes everyone up. Everyone looks at it and they say, well, should we run? Should we stay and fight? We don't know what to do. Now, this is a tough one, a pretty tough lizard. I was describing its muscles and how it's kind of moving slowly towards them, so they have a little bit of time to think. One of them throws a javelin and it hits it for like 3 damage, something not a lot. And so I described how it barely affects it as it's just kind of walking forward. Then one of the players pulls out a wineskin. And in this wineskin, they had put some oil they found back in their safe room. And so they light the oil on fire and they launch it into the middle of the hallway, where in between them and the lizard. And this was a very, very, I think, strong tactic and something that probably saved them if they were going to stay and fight. Because what it did is it burned for 2 rounds and allowed the characters to basically take pot shots at the lizard across this flaming oil before the lizard was able to cross. And they did not as much damage as they could have, but a significant amount of damage to this lizard before it could make it across. Now, this whole time, I was making morale checks for the lizard, and the lizard was rolling ridiculous. It was not leaving that potential meal, and in fact, it succeeded in every single morale check and stayed and fought till the death in this entire encounter, which is kind of crazy because its morale was not particularly high. So eventually, the fire dies down, and the lizard starts to cross. So the Dragonborn Paladin and the Half-Orc Barbarian step in front. The rogue and the 2 rogues. There we go. The 2 rogues stepping back, and the lizard goes out to bite the Half-Orc Barbarian. In one bite, it bites him. It brings him down to almost 0 health, and he loses the saving throw and becomes paralyzed. At this point, I realized that, hey, if they don't kill this lizard soon, there's no way, they're going to be in big, big trouble. Because they're going to have to either leave the characters here to die or drag them out and try and fight off the lizard or just kill the lizard. Then one of the rogues has a beautiful shot from their bow and arrow and kills the lizard. And hey, guess what? They're able to survive that particular encounter. So from there, they decided they were going to go into the room that the lizard was in and maybe continue their long rest. But they got too excited because they realized, hey, there's a lot of stuff in here. They also, the Dragonborn Paladin, I believe, wanted to try and create some sort of anti-venom concoction potion for the half-orc barbarian who had poison coursing through his veins, and I thought this was kind of a fun idea, and so I did a kind of a skill train that did not go super well for them, but they basically found out that they needed some water, they needed some of a very small amount of venom from the lizard itself, and then they either needed another material to put in there, or they needed their anti-venom to be blessed by a cleric or holy symbol. It just so happens that in that room there is a holy symbol that is a single eye. Now, in the Lost City, Zargon is the big bad, and Zargon is written as not a god, but an ancient, old, very, very strong monster. Zargon also has a single eye. So it made sense to me that this was a holy symbol for the Eye of Zargon. The Synedicians believe that Zargon is a god, so that also makes sense that that holy symbol with a single eye is a holy symbol of Zargon. And I decided at this moment that, you know what, even though Zargon is not a god, I think that if enough people follow a very powerful being, it gives them some status of godhood. And so I gave this holy symbol the same powers that a holy symbol that a cleric would carry, and decided that, you know what, if this anti-venom concoction that this paladin was creating was blessed with this Eye of Zargon holy symbol, then it would work. So the paladin does it, it works, and so all of a sudden the half-orc barbarian is no longer paralyzed and can begin moving. They gather some treasure from the room, they head back to the Brotherhood of Gorm, or I'm sorry, to the Warrior Maidens of Madura, and from there they do some selling, and one of the characters joins them. Then they head back to the Brotherhood of Gorm, they sell some more, and one of the characters joins them, and that wraps up the adventure. At this point, though, I have two really interesting decisions to make, because the half-orc barbarian was healed by a potion that was blessed, by the Eye of Zargon. It seems like there's some possibilities there to connect some of the danger, some of the intelligence that you could gain about Zargon through the half-orc barbarian. The other interesting thing is that the paladin, who's supposed to be a beacon of lawful good, has used an evil holy symbol to heal somebody. And so that is something I have to think about too. I haven't decided what to do with these, but I imagine that with the half-orc barbarian, they're going to begin getting dreams of Zargon, and maybe Zargon is going to talk to them, and maybe Zargon is even going to ask them to join his faction, so become a priest of Zargon in secret. And for the paladin, I may ask the paladin to complete a certain quest before they can get full powers or get forgiven by whatever deity that they happen to be serving. So that was the end of session 3. I'm excited to see where session 4 goes. I appreciate everybody watching, and I'll see you in the next video.